Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm here on what will be my last sunrise shoot here in Arizona. We're approaching a mountain peak known as the Three Sisters. And as you can see, it's already starting to light up just a little bit. So I'm looking forward to finding a composite fairly quickly. I probably should have been ideally here about a half hour ago, but since I just got here now, hopefully I'll be able to find something pretty quick. And really, all the Palo Verde trees around here that are still in bloom, I think the possibilities are pretty high that I'll find something pretty decent in a short time. So let me put you down so I can continue walking, find a spot pretty quickly. Once the sun rises, I'll probably have maybe an hour or so of good golden light before it starts getting too intense. But it's a quite an impressive peak, and I can see why the Pereas, Mike and Chris, come here often to shoot. All right, so let me put you down and I'll keep on walking and I'll get back to you once I've started setting up. Okay, so I have arrived at my first composition, and basically I have these, I'm not sure what kind of cactus it is. I'll have to look it up later, and I'll post the type of cactus on the final image when I show it. But this is going to be pretty simple. I've got the Three Sisters mountains framed right in the middle of the image, and I'm going to focus stack this because I got the foreground cacti, which are kind of framing and leading right to the mountain, much closer obviously than the mountain is. And even though I'm going to be using a small shutter, small aperture of like f13, I'm still going to focus stack and take maybe at least 2 or 3 images to make sure I get everything in focus. So first exposure, focus on the front cactus. I've got my 24 to 30 105 lens zoomed out to about 32 millimeters, it looks like. And my settings are ISO 100, 2 seconds, because it's still blue hour. The sun hasn't really crested the horizon yet. So this is going to be a blue hour shot, and then once the sun crests and lights up the mountains, I'm going to have a very different image. But I'm going to take my blue hour shot first. Also going to adjust the polarizer a little bit to get a little bit more color onto the foliage. First exposure here, and you'll see the final image momentarily. All right, Three Sisters is just starting to light up. As you can see here on the video, the sun is just starting to move slowly down the face of the mountain, and once it gets a little bit lower, really lighting up all Three Sisters, I guess you would call it, I'll be ready for my second shot. I'm not lit up right where I'm standing, but that's going to come pretty quickly because as I'm looking at it, the sun is rising over a low point in the range over directly to my right. So I'm going to have some good light on the cactus and the mountains very shortly. All right, so I'm going to take my second shot. The mountains are now like half lit, and the settings are pretty much the same, except I've got f13 at 1 second at ISO 100. And one thing I did with the last shot, which I'm also going to do with this one, is expose for the foreground and the mountains. Then I'm going to take a separate shot with the polarizer off to shoot the sky, because with a fairly wide angle, polarizer tends to it does funky things with the sky. It puts a big dark circle somewhere you don't want it. So I'm really just going to, so right now I'm exposed for the foreground. I'm going to take my first shot here, then refocus for the midground and then for the background, and then I'm going to take a separate exposure for the sky. And then you'll see the final result of that shot after this. All right, the light is happening. You can see now the Three Sisters are kind of partly lit up. The foothills are in shadow, but now the foreground is really nicely lit up. So I've got a real sense of layers here of light. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit more just to really focus on the mountain and the very foreground cactus. I don't really need the bushes that are right in the foreground, but I really want to emphasize the beauty of the mountain. I had to drop my glasses a little bit to do this. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing that I did before. Take 3 exposures, first on the foreground, then the midground, and then the mountains. And I'm going to have to move quickly while I have the light exactly where it is, because I don't want everything lit up. All right, so here's going to be exposure number 1. My base settings are 1/5 of a second at f13 and ISO 100. Oh, that's going to look so hot. All right, exposure number 2. Crank in, check the focus. And exposure 3, focus on the mountain. And I still have the polarizer on the lens. And now I'm going to remove the polarizer and just take exposure for the sky, which is, I'm not sure, it's going to be a lot faster exposure. But I'm not changing the aperture because I still want the mountain topped in focus, so it'll be easier to mask it in later. Okay, job good. All right, so I'm going to pack up really quickly, move around, see what else I can find the next half hour or so before the light gets too harsh. Once again, I took separate images for the foreground and background with the polarizer mounted. This is the foreground image. The sky image is exposed much shorter and is overall a bit darker. Last, the final 3-image composite after a lot of editing. All right, so I've set up for my last composition. Well, I won't say it's my last composition, but certainly the last one I'm going to be using of the three sisters. I've moved locations to get a nice foreground of prickly pear cactus with the Palo Verdes in the midground and the mountains still in the background. So I'm going to use very similar procedures I did before. 3 exposures, 1 on the prickly pears, 1 on the Palo Verdes, and 1 on the mountain, and then a separate one. Actually, I may not need a separate one for the sky because where I'm standing right now and with a longer focal length, polarizer doesn't look too weird, but I think I'll probably take a separate sky shot anyway. And you see I've got the camera pretty low because I want to have as much connection from the foreground to the midground to the background as possible. In fact, I'm going to drop the camera just a little bit lower in terms of angle, maybe closer up. One thing is that you don't want to get too married to one composition, especially as the light changes, because everything looks different once you move around even a little bit. Yeah, I think I like this a little bit better. All right, so same procedure. Focusing first on one of the very foreground cacti. My settings are 1/20th of a second, f11. And actually, I'm going to change that to f13. f13, 1/20th of a second, ISO 100 for exposure number 1. All right, second exposure is going to be focused on the Palo Verdes in the midground. And the third one is going to be on the mountain. And one more for the sky without the polarizer. So let's take this off. drop the shutter speed down to 1/60th of a second. Get a nice blue sky. And I think that's going to do it for this location. It's now only 6:35 in the morning. It's 6:25 in the morning. It's not even an hour since sunrise yet. And already the light is getting a little bit funky. So I want to see if I can get one more shot somewhere around here, but I think I've got the best of what I'm going to get today.
This time around, I focus stacked 3 images but opted to not use the separate sky exposure. Instead, I worked in post to even out the exposure of the polarized sky.
Alright, I've got one more composition. Basically, this is going to be another detail shot. I've got these little group of cactus. I don't know what it is. Again, if I can find the identification, I'll post it on the video. But it's backlit by the sun, which is actually right in my face. So that's causing me, well, it's actually giving me two things. It's giving me a nice halo effect of the backlit bristles, but it's also giving me a little bit of glare on the lens. So I'm going to have to shade the camera with my hat. If I can find a spot there where it removes the glare and doesn't actually get in the shot. Just right about there. So again, I'm using a 5-shot exposure bracket. I'll blend them in post. Settings are 1/8 of a second at f13, ISO 100, and okay, a little shade right there. All right, here we go. Let's check that and make sure the hat wasn't in the shot. Looks like it was not. Okay.
For this composition, the exposure bracket was a safety net I didn't need. I processed the base exposure alone for the final composition. The main work was bringing up details and contrast from the shadow areas.
All right, I found yet another composition. Some nice field of saguaro, actually pretty much right behind where I was just standing a minute ago. But I've got a nice field of saguaro backlit by the sun with the bluff directly behind it, and then some, you can see on the right side of the background, a few layers of mountains going into the background. So this is going to be very pretty, I think. I'm going to again take a bracketed set of shots because of the fact that, again, very high dynamic range with a very bright sky. I do have the polarized one. I think I'm going to leave it on this time. Let me just turn it around a little bit. Just shielding my eyes from the sun so I can see what the heck I'm doing. I want to make sure I've got the foliage nice and bright. So I think this is going to work. So again, focus bracketing. And I might again take one more shot without the polarizer to just expose the sky to see how that works. But I'm focused right now on the one lit Palo Verde bush that's right in front of me. Actually, it's kind of in the midground, and at f14, everything should pretty much be in decent focus. So here we go, 1/30th of a second, f14, ISO 100, 5-shot bracket. I do have a little bit of sun glare, so I think I'm going to do that over. Let me just see where the sun is and how closely I can hold my hat and not shade the lens and not get the hat in the shot right about there. So I'm going to try that again. Pardon my arm in the shot, but it is what it is. Okay, I think that's going to be better. Let's just take a quick look.
Once again, I ultimately processed the base exposure from the exposure bracket. I thought about creating an HDR composite, but I decided I didn't need it.
All right, I've got one more shot of the mountain of the Three Sisters, this time framed by a pair of Palo Verdes. You see it right here. I'm going to be focusing, well, again, I'm going to take another exposure. Actually, I don't think I'm going to need an exposure bracket because everything is pretty well lit right now. I am going to do a focus bracket, focusing first on the foreground bushes and then on the mountain. So it's probably going to take 2 shots. So let's set up for the first one right here. Just double check my front focus. It looks pretty good. All right, so 2-second timer. And now second exposure on the mountain. Let's just refocus. Focus guide is pretty helpful, but I'm going to punch it anyway, just to double check. Nice and crisp. Second exposure. And I've already actually pre-focused in the camera to a 16:9 crop because there's some foreground stuff in the, that I really don't want. The sky is pretty blue, so outside of the top of the bush, I don't really want that either. So the final result you're going to see right here. All right, I've returned to the backlit saguaros. This time I'm coming a little bit closer, so the saguaros will be more prominent in the shot. As you can see here, that Palo Verde bush is no longer in the shot. I really want to focus on the saguaros, the bluff that's on the left center, and the mountains in the background, which have a nice misty layer to them. I'm not sure if that's dust, air pollution, or what. Well, it's not mist, but it's definitely dust. And it's giving me a nice sense of depth to the background. Again, I'm focusing on the pretty much on the midground because I'm using an aperture of f14 again to keep things kind of close. I think I'm going to have to shade the lens a little bit just to see if there's any glare. Unfortunately, I've got so much. Actually, let me use the LCD for once in my life. DVF, I should say. The only thing that bothers me is that it's not really that much of a deal. I mean, I've got the cactus on the far right, broaching or breaching the horizon. I could raise the camera. I think I'm going to try and do that. I'm going to raise the camera to about yay high. That should allow a clear shot of the cactus without a brick in the horizon. All right, so as you can see, I have recomposed. No, never doubt the value of a high tripod that can also go really low. As you've seen me use both low angles and high angles in this video. In fact, I can get even lower with that other shot if I'd wanted to. But in any case, so I've got the thing the camera's a little bit over eye level. I removed the polarizer because since I'm shooting almost directly into the sun, it's basically not really polarizing much at all. So I'm going to take a 5-shot exposure bracket, 2 stops over, 2 stops under. My base exposure was 1/80th of a second at f14 and ISO 100. And you'll see the image right here.
For this final composition, I liked the 2-stop underexposed image best because of the sky. I was able to bring back all the shadow detail in post. The recoverable shadow detail in R5's raw file, I gotta tell you, is simply incredible.
All right, so I think I'm going to call that an episode. This is my last morning in Arizona. I'll be turning back to New York tomorrow. It's now 2 hours past sunrise, and basically the gold is going out of the light. You know, the sun's not that high yet, but it's already getting pretty harsh, and I think I've gotten the best I'm going to get from this area. I'm glad to be able to have gotten here, and I hope to return back to the desert Southwest, if not the Scottsdale, Phoenix area, but somewhere else. But because desert photography is certainly, as I've found out, a challenge, but also can yield some really interesting results. And I've gotten some nice wildlife and flower shots, as well as landscapes while I've been down here. In fact, at the end of this video, I'm going to post some images that I took at the Desert Botanical Garden 2 days ago of some basically birds and flowers, and hope you find those interesting. So if you like what you've seen in this episode and you want to see more content and you're not already subscribed, please hit that subscription bell that's right down here. Please give me a like and a comment and any other feedback that you have about the video and about the series of videos that you've seen at this point. It would really help my channel out and help me grow. I look forward to seeing you again in the very near future. And so until the next video, bye-bye.